Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and this is my first video with that new intro. Hopefully you guys liked it. Same song, different visuals. But today what I want to do is going to be the first in a series of videos. We're going to be doing a Express React build. So this build is going to be using Express to build an API. We're going to just build a really simple API. I'm not going to use a database just to keep it real simple. Actually, yeah, let's use Mongo. Why not? So what I'll do is I will turn on my Mongo server. Was it Mongo? I think I have a command already ready to go. I think it's like Mongo server. Okay, cool. My Mongo server is on. Okay, so we can use my local Mongo server. And we're going to do is build a simple API. Then we're going to build a React app, but we're going to be using the newest version of React Router, which has the new sort of data API. So basically, instead of a lot of complex uses of like use state and use use effect, we're going to be taking advantage of those data APIs and using loaders and actions to really simplify that front end build quite a bit, where it's going to feel more like you're building a more traditional monolithic app, where basically forms submit to actions and you just load data. It's going to be very, very pleasant. Okay, if you want to see what sort of like the olden ways, you can see some of my previous Express React builds. Okay, so let's off to the races. Let's first create our backend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my terminal, try to use the terminal as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a folder called backend. Okay, I'm going to open up a separate terminal just so that we can get this out of the way. And I'm going to create a React app, npx create React app, and that's going to be front end. Okay, so that way that's just kind of going while okay, let's just add the @latest flag. Okay, so that's working. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cd into that backend folder. I'm gonna touch the things that I need. So I'm gonna touch server.js. I'm going to touch a file called models/connection.js, models slash we'll do a dog. No, let's do a cheese model. So it'll be cheese.js. And then we're going to have a controller/cheese.js for our routes, our cheese routes for our cheese API, and I think that should do it. Okay. Oh, yep, because I have to make those folders first. So make dir models and controllers. Let's make those folders, controllers. And anything else I want to put in there? No, I think that's pretty good for now. Because we're not building the front end in Express, so I don't really need like a public folder to serve like CSS or anything. I don't need a views folder because I'm not creating any views because the React app is going to serve sort of like that view layer. Okay, so in that case, what all I really need to do now is make those files, but I already made the server.js. So let's do that. Okay, let's just make sure that all those files exist. Good, good, good. Okay. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, other files I want to make is touch.getignore and .env. Okay, and in the .env, of course, I want to put in node modules to ignore the node modules folder, and the .env file because we don't want to push that up. Okay, and oops, I put that in the wrong file. That should be in the getignore. And in the .env, we will define our port variable, which we'll just use 4000 because the React app is going to use 3000. And our database URL, which I'm just going to use my local Mongo database. So that just be mongodb / no username and password. So it would just be localhost, was it 27017 if I remember right, today's, we'll just call this Express React DB, my Express React database. Sure, why not? Okay, so that's going to be our database URL. That'll connect to my local Mongo server that I have running on my computer instead of to like a mongodb.com, just for simplicity. And Cool. I think that's all I need there. So now I just need to create my package.json, npm init-y. Okay, now that I have my package.json in place, I can install all the libraries I need. npm install. I'm going to need Express because that's going to be our backend server. I'm going to want Morgan because I like the logging, helps me debug. Okay, I'm going to want cores because now we have two separate apps. So in order for our front end app to be able to talk to our back end app, I need to make sure I set up those cores headers. We're just going to keep it simple and just allow anybody to communicate with their back end app. Express Morgan cores, and I think that's pretty. Oh, and .env because we are using a .env file. Okay, so that should keep us out of trouble. Okay. Now, I feel like using ES module syntax for my backend just because why not? So, then again, if you're not familiar with what ES module syntax is usually when you write a Node app, you'd have to use like require to import things. You would do module.exports to export things. But if you've ever written a React app, there you use ES modules where you write like import thing from place, and then you export and export default. With Node, in newer versions of Node, you can use that now, but it's not on by default. So to turn that on, we just go to here scripts, and I would just put in like type is the key, and then I add module. And that's going to let me use ES module syntax for when I write my code now. Okay, so now everything is going to be import and export instead of require and module.exports. And then I'm going to set up my two scripts. I always like to have my start script, my production script be node server.js, and then I want my dev script to be nodamon server.js. So that way we use nodamon in my development side. So that way I don't have to keep restarting the server when I'm developing. So my code changes reflect. But I don't want that happening when my code is live with users. So we have our start script for production. Okay, cool. So that's all set up. So now let's go set up our server.js. Okay, again, I'm using ES module syntax now. So instead of doing like const express, it's now import express from express. Let me just import everything else. Import Morgan from Morgan. Import cores from cores. Import .env from .env. Okay, so there's all my imports. Wonderful. Okay, now I'm going to go get my environmental variables. Okay, for my .env file by calling .env.config. Okay, wonderful. Then we're going to go create our express app object. So create express app. Okay, so const app equals express. Wonderful. Then we're going to go register all our middleware. Okay, so I'm going to say generally the first thing I'm going to want to happen is I'm going to want logging to happen first. So I'm going to say app.use Morgan, and then we'll use the dev script. Okay, then we're going to parse any JSON bodies because it's going to be a JSON API. So express.json, that'll parse any JSON data coming in and add it to the rec.body. And then I want to add app.use. I'm going to add the cores headers because without that, any external request will get rejected. So actually, I should put that first. So that way we make sure that our response doesn't get rejected too early on. Okay, that basically what happens is that because again our React app is going to be running on port 3000, our backend app is running on port 4000. So far as the browser knows, those are two completely separate websites. So it's thinking, hey, there's this external thing that's making a request to the server. By default, it's going to reject it when the browser is the intermediary, because that's how the browser implements this thing called CORS, cross-origin resource sharing. And basically, when we put this on, it's going to make sure that this server will send the proper headers back to the browser to say, yeah, this request is okay. When you do it blank like this, you're basically saying, yeah, like any request is fine. Okay, from anywhere, which is fine for now. Generally, you can read this library's documentation. There's ways where you can sit there and say only these URLs, like only this domain, this domain, this domain, are allowed to actually successfully make requests to this API. But not what we care about right now. Okay, so that's all fine and good. So that pretty much sets all that up. So now we just need routes and routers. Okay, I always like to test things out before I get too far, so I want to make sure I just put in like a nice little test route, app.get slash recres, and we're going to say res.json message, it works. Okay, so if we see this, then we know our server is working. And then last, app.listen. Well, actually, first we're going to set up our listener. What I'd like to do is make sure I define my port variable, which is always going to equal the environmental variable. But if for some reason the environmental variable is not defined, okay, and actually technically in newer JavaScript you can do this instead, okay, which, I mean, in this case it probably wouldn't really matter, but the idea is like, let's say you legitimately ever needed to like you define something as 0 in your environmental variables, that's when this would be useful. Um, uh, cool. So, because basically when I use this, if this were the values of 0, empty string, null, undefined, any of these falsy values, then it uses the default value. When I use this, it's only if this is like undefined, I think it may be null. But if it's like 0 or an empty string, I think it'll still use this, because maybe that's what you want. So just a neat little thing. What's it called? Nullish coalescence, I think is the name of the feature. Okay, but I'm going to say process.env.port, and if, you know, assuming there's no port defined, we'll say 4444. Okay, then we can create a little message. So const app.listen port. Then we write our callback, which will just console.log listening on port. Okay, so first things first, I want to make sure I test out that server. Node them on server.js, and I get a crash because port 4000 is already in use. Well, that's not good. Okay, so luckily I have a script for killing ports, so I'll just write kill port. I always forget if the P is capitalized or not, but it's a kill port 4000. Yep, that's right. Good. Okay, and yeah, let me just also just kill port 3000 just in case. Oops. 3000, kill 300. Hopefully nothing important was on 300. Okay, kill port 3000. Good, there was something running on 3000, so luckily we killed it. Because usually if there wasn't anything on there, you get like this error where... Okay, so we cleared out our ports that we'll be using. Now let me run this again. Node them on server.js. There we go. There's my message. Now I know this is running. I see my little message, my server's running. I see that nodemon is running. Again, the terminal output is gold. It gives us signals as to what's working and what's not working. So I'm going to head over to localhost 3000, and I should see our little test message. Oh no, not 3000, it's 4000. Ta-da! Okay. So that's all working. Okay, so now the next focus is going to be like connecting our Mongo. Okay, so let me head over to connection.js and start setting that up. So I'm going to want to import mongoose from... Oh, I didn't install mongoose. So let me stop the server for a second. npm install mongoose. That's kind of important if I'm going to use a database, or particularly a Mongo database. So I'll let that install. Okay. Back on the road again. So import mongoose from mongoose. Then I'm going to import .env from .env. Then I'm going to import anything else I really want to import. Okay, I think we're good. So first thing we of course want to like make sure we're using our .env variables. So get .env vars. Okay, and let's just define a variable with our database URL. Okay, and then what I want to do here is we're going to say it should be process.env.database URL. You know, just in case I'm working locally, I'll put a fallback. So again, I'll use this thing again. And then the fallback will just be like a local URL, MongoDB slash localhost 27017 slash default. So I know if I connect to the default database, I know like, hey, if I have something wrong with my .env. Okay, cool. Then we'll do mongoose.connect. So we'll connect the database. Mongoose.connect. Connect to the database URL. Then we're going to make sure we want some messages because again, terminal output is gold, so I need to get my messages. So connection messages. And the way we do that is we have this variable called mongoose.connection, which we can then listen for events on. So actually I'll just do this on a separate line like that. Dot on. So I want to listen for the open event. And if the connection is open, what I want to do is just say, you know, connected to MongoDB, and then I want to inject the URL just to see which URL I'm connected to database URL. I wouldn't usually not put the database URL as something I log. Reason being is oftentimes you do have your username and password, but right now I'm working with a database that's local to my computer, so it there's there's no security risk at the moment. But I wouldn't do that in production, okay? Because in production, you wouldn't want to expose that connection string. Okay, so just as a little side note. Okay, but it's just this way you can kind of see like, hey, look, it's not using the default, it's going to be using the one we specified in .env. Okay, if the connection closes, then what I want to do is say console.log. Oh, I just realized I didn't console.log this string. Console.log. Okay, I put that spot. There we go. Console.log here. Console.log. What I want to do is console.log disconnected from Mongo. And then the last message dot on in case there's an error in connecting. So that way I know what the error is. Again, this function always receives the error. How do I know that? It's because I've read the documentation. It's not magic. Okay, so if you're doing the programming thing, you just got to get used to reading documentation. Okay, and then I just want to console log whatever the error is. Okay, wonderful. And then let's just export this connection. So I'm just going to export default mongoose. Okay, and we're good to go. Okay, nice. So now I need to define my model, my cheese model. So we're going to import mongoose, but we're going to import mongoose from connection, not from mongoose, because again, the idea is we want that connection file to run. Long as I import it somewhere, that file runs, so I don't have to then import it again somewhere else. So I import the mongoose from connection, and then I can start working from there. Start creating my schema and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to destruct schema and model from mongoose, so that way I don't have to type mongoose.schema and mongoose.model all the time. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, that just makes life a little bit easier. Okay, and now we can construct our schema. So this will be our cheese schema. Okay, so const cheese schema equals new schema. Keep it real simple. Name, which will be string. Is it tasty? We'll say that's a boolean. And technically that should be an uppercase string above there. There we go. Tasty boolean. And then let's include the timestamps. Timestamps true. Okay, again, how do I know that? I would put that there, documentation, so I just know that the first argument is the schema, an object that describes the schema, And this second argument is an object with configurations. One of those configurations being whether I want timestamp field to be created. Okay, read the documentation. This would be in the Mongoose documentation when I'm looking at how the schema constructor works. Okay, so now that I have that, next thing I need to do is look up cheese. I need to create the cheese model. Okay, so const cheese equals model, and then in there what we do is we pass the name of the model, which will be cheese, and then we pass in the schema that model should follow. Choose schema, a cheese schema, and then we can then export that model. Export default model, cheese, and now we can use that in our routes. Okay, so that's all set to go. I'm going to head over to controllers. So here I'm going to want to import express from express. No, I want to import the whole library, so express. Okay, I want to, and I don't want to do it with a capital E. There we go. Import express from express. Import cheese from the models. Anything else I really need here? I think that's good. Then we're going to create a router, because what we're doing is we're defining our controller for our routes. So router is going to equal express.router. Okay, and then we can start defining our routes. Okay. So again, this is going to be for /cheese, aka our index route. Okay, so router.get slash, and that's going to be recres. And I want to use async await because I don't like using .thens or callbacks. So what's nice about this, I can just be like const cheeses. Let me think about how what's the way I want to do this. Let's just do it this way. Const cheese dot const cheese dot find. Actually, it would be const cheeses is going to be the variable because it's the collection of cheeses, which is going to equal await cheese.find. Because this is going to go find it from the database. That's going to return a promise. I'd rather wait for that promise to finish. And when that promise resolves, the find function always returns me an array of the results. So that array will be found in cheeses. Now, the only problem with the sync await is there's no like .catch that's built in to handle like errors. So you should just use .catch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a boilerplate function for catching. So we'll just call it like I'll just call it the const catch or catcher equals, and again this always generally receives the error, and what I want to return, and then what I want to do is the console.log the error. Okay. Let me think about that. How would I want to do this? Actually, because I want to make sure I can send a response. So what I'm going to do is I want the response object in here too. And really what this is going to do is that this takes the response and then returns a function. So this function returns a function. I'm going to practice a technique called currying. Currying is when you chop up what you want to do into separate functions. So the idea is that I'm going to pass the response to this function, and then it's going to return a function that does the next step, which is take in the error. So the next function takes in the error, and then what I can do is I can be like res dot. This is actually the first time I found a practical, really good application for this technique. It just, I just had like an aha moment. Always good to have those even after years of doing this. Okay, res dot send, or actually, we want to say like res dot status 400 because there's an error. And what we're going to do is we're going to send JSON, and we're going to send over the error. as the response. So that way, if there's an error, you can see it. You'll get a response with the error. Cool. So now what I can do is if I want to handle the error for any of these awaits, I just do a dot catch after it, and then I can just pass in catcher and pass in the response object. Okay, and that will return the right function. Okay, and that will just allow me to continue using this syntax without having to write a whole bunch of really repetitive catching or error handling code. But I want to make sure my errors are handled. Okay, so that little dot catch is going to handle the error if there is one. Hopefully there isn't. Okay, so I have the cheeses, and then I just want to res.json cheeses. Okay, send back that payload. So there's my index route. So again, we'll just build out all 4 of these, or 5 of these actually. Next we want, we'll do our show route. So that'd be cheeses slash ID, our show route. Okay, so that should be slash ID. Okay, and in this case, we're only getting 1 cheese. And essentially what we're doing is we're going to do find by ID, and we're passing in that rec.params.id. And again, this is going to be awaited, so it's just the result gets saved there. If something goes wrong, the dot catch will handle it. Okay, and then that error will be sent back as a response. So then I'll see what the error is. Okay. Sometimes you get like nothing back, but it is what it is. Okay. Cool. So that's that. But now we want to do the other routes. Okay. And actually, it doesn't really matter because there's no edit or new page in this case, so there should be no collisions. So now we can do our create route. So this will just be slash cheese. This is going to be our create route. So this is going to be a post to slash cheese. Okay, and then essentially this should just take cheese.create, and it should just take in the rec.body. Okay, and then create a new cheese. That new cheese gets sent here, and then we send it back as a response. We won't really need the response, but it'll be made. Okay, and then we will create our update route. So this would be slash cheese slash ID. But again, update's done through a put request to :ID. And in this case, what we're going to do is we do cheese.find by ID and update. And your first argument is the rec.params.id because you want to know which one you're updating. And then the second argument is going to be rec.body because that's the details of the update. And again, if that's successful, this cheese variable will get filled, and then we'll just send it back as JSON. If something goes wrong, then the dot catch runs. Okay, and then we should see an object with an error property. Okay, so one of those 2 things will happen. So that's it for that. Okay, and then our last one, slash cheese slash ID still, delete. So this can be a delete request instead. Okay, and this can be find by ID and remove. We don't care about the body because here you're just deleting, so we just need the ID. If that's successful, the deleted cheese will be stored in this variable. And if it's, how do I know that? I've read the documentation. Okay, so I read the documentation for things I'm using. Okay, it's a good habit to have. Okay, and then again, if it goes wrong, the dot catch will run. Okay, and then, yeah, so that's that. So technically all our routes are done. So now we're just going to export the router so we can use it somewhere else. Export default the router. And that needs to be wired up here in server.js. So we're going to import the router. Import router from .controllers/cheese. Okay. Oh, we'll just, yeah, that's fine. And then I just register the router. So I'll go over here and say like app.use. But again, this should only be used for routes that start with /cheese. And whenever you see a route that starts with /cheese, then match it against the router. Okay, cool. So technically my API is done. Ta-da! Okay, that's all it takes. Full CRUD API with database connectivity. And all it took us was about 30 minutes. So let's just test this out real quick. npm npm start, why not? What? Import controllers. Oh, that put cannot find module. Where did I import? Where's it saying I didn't find it? This is in server.jas. Should be /controllers. My folders messed up here. No, /controllers / because they're ES modules. I have to do the whole file name. There we go. So this is probably that's gonna be a problem in a few places. Let me just double check. This should be .js. And then over here and the tier, I need to make sure it's connection.js, .js, .js, .js. Okay, I think we're good now. So let's do npm start. Okay. So right off the bat, I have there's one thing that kind of makes me alerted. I see listening on port 4000, but I don't see my connection to my database message. I see this deprecation warning, which is fine, but I don't see the message that would mean that I'm connected to the database. So first I want to just check, did I set this message up right? Okay, so during the open event, so if a connection is opened, I should see console.log. Oh, looks like it didn't connect, so we're seeing the error get console out, so that means this thing ran. So let's see what it says. Localhost server description. Error connection refused. It says connection refused. Did it stop running? Let's see here. My server is running. So let's do this. I'm gonna open up another terminal. I'm gonna open up the Mongo terminal thing. Okay, so I'm in the shell. Now what I'd like to see is the connection information. So let me just take a look. There should be some information on that around here somewhere. Current value. Start server with bind IPv disable. Okay. Unknown help option. Is it just help? There we go. So what I want to do is I want to see if they have like some information about connection to show me if it's actually running on 27017. So help connect. Let's try that out. Okay. But I want to know what the port is. That's what I'd like to know. So let's see here. Collections, profile, admin, help, sharding, administrative help, connecting to a DB help, key shortcuts, show database name, show users, show recent system.profile, show accessible logger names, set current database, result the last time value, to default. Let's try help misc. So when I look at this, I take a look at this error. It's saying connection refused, so that tells me I'm not connecting to the right port. But I need to see what port it is on. Use DB name, show log, show profile. Maybe that. Show profile. Nope. Replica set helper, sharding helpers, help on collections, miss things to know, map produce. Show database names, show collection, show users. So just did show profile, show logs. Show command line, run Mongo help to see those options. Okay, I'm just gonna exit here. To quit. There we go. Okay, let me see if I see any details here. So let's go back to where we first ran the command. Does it tell us anything about the port? If we look at this very carefully, automatically disabling network. Yeah, it says we're on port 27017, so that's right. So let me just take a look at my .env. .env 27017 MongoDB Express React DB. No reason why that shouldn't connect. Saying it was confused, refused. So let's try it again. That's not connecting. Okay, so after some investigation, I have a feeling that it's just like there's this .sock file that I need to get removed, but I gotta find where it is that is blocking me using the normal default port. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this, and I'm going to try to start this on a different server. So let's try this on 20,000. Mongo server port. Let's see, that took. Good, it is working on port 20,000. So let's update that in my .env. 20,000. Okay, and then let's try this again. npm start. And are you going to connect? Okay, that's not working either, so I'm going to assume that I'm probably just going to need to reinstall Mongoose. So I'm just going to use my Mongoose URI from mongo.com, mongodb.com. Okay, so I've swapped out the URL of my .env. I'm not going to show that because that would be a security issue. But let's start. Let's try this out. Yay, it connected. But I forgot that I console logged it. Okay, so I'll just have to delete this user. Fun, fun, fun. Okie dokie. But it's working. Okay. Database URL. So let me not console log. So this alludes to the issue I said earlier. Do not console log that. Okay. So I did that. So now I have to destroy the user on that database. But I'll do that after this video is recorded. Okay. So we are connected. So I can see my two messages showing that I am connected. Wonderful. Okay. And yeah, so we're good to go. So now I can test out my API using this. So let's try this out. Localhost 4000. /cheese. I should get an empty array because I haven't made any cheeses yet. Oop. Oh, because I have the HTTPS and this is local, so this should be HTTP. There we go. I got an empty array. Good. Now let's try the post to make a cheese. So this should be name. Call it monster. And then we have tasty. And we should say it's true. There we go. Okay, so if I send that over, and look, it made a new cheese. So our API is working. So that's all well and good. Okay, so with that, we move forward. In the next video, we'll start the React app. Okay, I'm going to go destroy that database user and go from there. So I'll see you all in the next one. Ciao.